it's about one phone call that made a big, big difference. Nico Kleynhans, over to you, please, sir.
I can't hear. Hi. Most of us enjoy looking forward to retirement, and Mr. X was no exception. He went to his HR and said, I'd like to retire on my 60th birthday. And they told him, well, there's 4.5 million rand lying in your pension fund. And you're allowed to take a third of it up front. So you can take 1.5 million for yourself, and 3 million will then buy you a monthly pension. And then he did something which was rather intelligent. He decided not to rely on what HR said and go and get some advice. And he made a phone call. And that phone call saved him 300,000 rand. Because what HR had told him was half true. The law says he is entitled to take a third up front. What HR did not tell him is that SARS comes to that party and they take their share of that third. And what's going to end up in his pocket is not the third. It's going to be the third, in this case, less 300,000 rand tax. And by the time you find out that tax has to be paid, it has already been deducted. Now, his plan was that 1.5 million will buy him a small house. He would be able to start a small business. And then the 3 million would give him a small pension. So now he was going to have 300,000 rand less, which meant he would not be able to buy his house, and he would not be able to start his business because he took advice from HR. HR are not competent to give him advice. So that was his first mistake. The second mistake Mr. H or Mr. X made was HR told him that the pension would increase by 5% per annum. Now that sounded good to him, but he was going to retire at the age of 60. Inflation in South Africa presently is running at 7.5%. So by the time he gets to 70, his money has been losing value for 10 years. By the time he gets to 80, his value has been losing for 20 years. So what exactly is he going to end up living off? Now, why that's important is because I was once sent to a home of a retired teacher about 30 years ago. And her family had immigrated to Australia, and they were worried about what was happening to Mom. She had a house in Goodwood that she had settled. She has since passed away. And when I walked in, I realized there was no electricity in her home. And as I walked into a kitchen, there was a can of dog food that had been opened. And that was going to be her lunch, because her pension was 200 rand a month. And when she'd originally retired as a teacher, that was enough for her to live on. And when her kids toodled off to Australia, she was too proud to tell them that the annuities had stopped and she could no longer afford even electricity. So when you retire, you can't assume the money you're going to get in the first 2 or 3 years is going to be enough when you're 70 and 80 years old. The third mistake people tend to make is they're thinking about cashing in an RA. And again, they've learned that you can take a third of the RA up front and 2/3 will buy you a monthly income. And then they remember that you can take 500,000 tax-free. That's half the truth. That 500,000 is the total that you can take in your lifetime. So if you cashed in an investment 20 years ago and got 50,000, you would have got that without tax. If you then cashed in another investment of 40,000 later, you would have got that without tax. Now you're taking 500,000. SARS remembers the 50 and the 40. And now they're saying you are now over your 500,000 and you're now going to pay tax. And by the time they tell you, you're in trouble. So folks, if you're getting to cash in those kind of investments, pay for a CFP to do the proper calculations. It's going to cost you a couple of $100, but you're going to save potentially hundreds of thousands of rand. The people who do the selling of off-the-shelf products are not going to do those calculations for you, and they're not going to give you proper advice. Get advice. Like this other gentleman, it was worth it. He saved 300,000 rand. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Nico.